The news begins in West Africa, where the crisis within the All Progressive Congress in Benue State, northern Nigeria, assumed a worrisome turn on Friday when anti-riot police operatives took over the party's secretariat. As early as 7 a.m., a detachment of mobile and regular police operatives, including men of Civil Defense Corps and livestock guards, took over the gate, mounting heavy block to roads leading to the secretariat. The police command also stopped the State Executive Council meeting and APC stakeholders meeting by the Comrade Austin Agada-led EXCO of the party slated for Friday. The Senate in Nigeria has urged the Police Service Commission, PSC, to recruit a minimum of 10 candidates from each of the 774 local government areas of the country. This followed the adoption of a motion by Senator Denge Menga yesterday at plenary. Presenting the motion, Menga said the former president, Muhammadu Buhari's administration, had ordered the recruitment of 10,000 constables annually as part of measures to address the nation's security challenges. The senator said President Bola Tinubu was keen in implementing the policy, adding that the recruitment should be conducted based on the strength of each local government, especially in the area of community policing. The proliferation of small arms, drug abuse, and other social vices have been identified as major enablers of violent attacks witnessed in some parts of Plateau State. These attacks have claimed many lives and property have spanned over 2 decades, giving reasons for urgent need to end them in no distant time. Chizoba Anyonwe in Jos, the Plateau State capital, completes this report.
To say that people have lost count of casualty figures in the series of attacks that have taken place in some parts of Plateau State within the last 20 years is not an understatement. Part of the conversation over the years have been on how to identify and eliminate the causes or enabling factors that sustain the attacks. Members of the Clean Foundation, a non-governmental organization with major interest in using women to enthrone peace and security in society, paid a courtesy call on the chairman of the Nigerian Union of Journalists to seek collaboration in their task.
Also been able to advocate against the use of illicit drugs because they found out that illicit drugs has been one of the contributing factors to the crisis to youths. Whenever there's crisis, they just come up and they take in illicit drugs and then they go out there and start destroying and killing lives and properties. So they've been able to do an awareness and sensitization whereby they came out and they spoke against the use of drugs, and they were able to destroy so many drugs with the help of relevant authorities from within their communities.
She is the first female chairman of the NUJ in Plateau State, and her call is a joint effort of stakeholders for a more peaceful Plateau.
Let us also collaborate with other organizations. It's difficult for women to just go around and say, bring your arms out. But because you have this platform, I want to urge you to use your platform to reach out to security agencies and other organizations to see how we'll be able to retrieve those small arms and light weapons from the hands of a lot of people. It's no longer about youth now, it's everybody. Like people try to get these things to arm themselves.
Working mostly in Mangu, Wase, Riom, and Just North local government areas of Plateau State, Clean Foundation is set to trigger deeper involvement of women in maintaining peace in the state through training and mediation processes. In Jos for News Central, I am Chizoba Anyonwe.
The Commander General of Kano Hisbah Board, Sheikh Aminu Ibrahim Darawa, has resigned from his appointment. The head of the Kano Sharia Police tendered resignation in a short clip posted on his official Facebook page on Friday. Darawa's resignation comes less than 24 hours after Governor Abba Kabiru Yusuf faulted a new method of operations being deployed by Hisbah against acts of immorality in the state. While addressing ulama at the government house on Thursday, Governor Yusuf especially kicked against the mode of invading public places in the name of arresting prostitutes, an act he considered as uncivilized. Governor Yusuf also frowned at Hisbah's method of arresting suspects, insisting the board must review its present operations to correct the wrongs in society. Away from that, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has condemned the recent protests by the Nigeria Labour Congress, warning the labor movement to know that it is not the only voice of the people. He spoke at the commissioning of the Lagos Red Line train connecting Agbado to Oyingbo. The Labour Union had on Tuesday staged a protest over the hardship in the land, as well as the refusal of the federal government to implement agreements reached with the unions. But Tinubu came hard on the Labour in the course of his remark, saying Labour Union should understand that despite its acclaimed rights and freedom, it cannot fight an administration which is just 9 months old. And to unpack this, I'm joined by Zadiyu Yusuf, the National Coordinator, Middle Belt Patriots. Good afternoon. Glad to have you join me.
Thank you so much. It's glad to be here.
Let me start by asking you what your thoughts are on the response of the president to Labour, saying this is not the only voice of Nigerians.
Well, he is right in a sense. The Labour Congress is not the only voice of Nigerians. But then, in another way, I think the statement he made was let him throw a jab at the NLC. So everything looks like a joke. Nothing basically looks like something that matters. It doesn't basically strike his conscience or touch. It doesn't prick his heart. So that was him trying to let them know, Odeshi, no shaking. It's not exactly as if I give a damn about what you're doing. But I must first say that personally, to me, I've got my reservations with what the Labour Congress is doing. But to look at people basically trying to call the attention of government with regards to the suffering, Nigerians are in, and you feel you politicize everything. I mean, to a large extent, he even said that they should go and prepare for 2027. In other words, whatever they find, whatever they see, whatever they receive, basically they bargained for it. So it's not exactly as if there is anything that is going to change. He will not adjust any policy. He will not reverse anything. The message is simple and clear. This means nothing to me. I don't identify in any way with whatever it is you stand for. That basically is what I think he is trying to tell Labour Congress. And then to a larger point, telling them they are not the voice of the people. Basically, well, not to politicize things, but it's not exactly as if his position in the presidency is representative of the people's will to a large extent. So when he says that, I do not really blame him. Whoever it is that got him there is basically those he could listen to. So not basically the masses. They are not the masses. So their plight is absolutely none of his business, if you'd ask me. That basically is what he was saying in that short sentence.
So with such comments from the president, as you have rightly interpreted, what should be the disposition of Labour going forward?
First of all, I think with regards to Labour, it would be better that the NLC as an organized body melts itself, subsumes itself into the pain and the agony of the masses. As an organized body, Labour has a track record of not having its end met for whatever reason, I do not know. But first, let's begin with basically the first step that Tinubu took when he was sworn in. Okay, something PMS selling for about 180 or 85 is now about 640 or 650, and in some places 690. And Labour was there too. Nothing happened. A whole lot of things. Look at what's happening to the Naira, all of that. So there are some of us who believe to a large extent that Labour itself might, whatever it is they are staging might just be a gimmick of the same presidency to make a fool of Nigerians.
If I may just...
An example is how comfortable are you with buying a liter of petrol for 614 naira in the Federal Republic of Nigeria? It doesn't make sense. Where was Labour then? So if you would ask me, Labour should subsume itself in the plight of the Nigerian masses and
just to
hope.
Yeah, permit me to just chip in there. Let me just quickly chip in the apologies for butting
Okay.
in. When you say labor should feel the pain of the masses, I'm wondering what you mean in clear terms, because labor, so to speak, is empathizing with Nigerians, and that's why they have called for strikes. I mean, so when you say, or protests, so when you say labor should feel much more the pulse of the average Nigerian, what do you mean in clear terms?
What I mean in clear terms is basically coming from my own suspicion that it's more or less in certain quarters, maybe certain players in the Labour Congress, it's basically a gimmick of the government. Like I said, we have known Labour to always be at the receiving end to not have its end met, primarily. So at the end of the day, what will happen is that they would say they had held a meeting, possibly with the minister of this or that, and they came to this agreement, and they will continue with their businesses. Those of them that are petroleum marketers will go on to it. Those of them that are employers of all kinds of labor will go back to it, and everything continues as it is. And then a couple of months later, they will rear their heads and say something. So to a large extent, whatever it is that has been the agitations of that organized body, I'm saying, at least for the past 2 decades, we have always known they've never gotten their ends met. There has never been a policy the government took and Labour Congress got it to reverse it and all of that. So to a large extent, to somebody like me and most masses in Nigeria, it looks like whatever protest they stage, even though it comes in the name of identifying with the masses of Nigeria, it looks more like a gimmick of the government, or the government hoping, let them go on strike, let this organized body go on strike. We know what to do. So the people will relax, believing they are doing it on our behalf. So when I say identify with the masses, I'm saying subsume that structure, that traditional structure called labor. Let it continue to exist, but come back and be an ordinary Nigerian. And we could put our heads together. And when we demand accountability from the government, when we demand to take our country back, when we demand that we are no longer going to sleep hungry or get killed by insecurity or get our economy messed up, definitely somebody will answer and pay for it.
Well, thank you so much for your time and expertise on the news. Zadiyi Yusuf, thank you once again.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure being here.
The much anticipated nationwide protest is come and gone amidst the controversies. Nigeria's organized labor says that it is not backing down and insisting it has given government a 2-week ultimatum to implement demands made by the union. Our correspondent Marvelous Obamano in this special report looks at the protest and gives details as to what it has achieved.
Several workers across Nigeria's geopolitical zone came out en masse at the instance of the nation's organized labor, heeding the call to take to the streets. From Kano, Adamawa Plateau, Kaduna and others in the north, to Edo, Ekiti, Oyo, Lagos and some others in the south, Nigerian workers were unanimous in expressing their displeasure to government. However, the question many citizens ask is if the protests, like previous orders, have achieved much for Nigerian workers.
I don't think you can achieve anything reasonable through protests in this country. You understand? I believe in dialogue. You understand? That is in Nigeria. I don't think the lawmakers even respect people that protest. You can never get what you want through protests.
I have not seen anything that have been achieved through that protest. We can only protest at the end. We call of that they will negotiate later. At the end, nothing to talk about. Before you know it will not die off.
If you look at the NLC right from the days of Obasanjo, they have break their power. NLC doesn't have that power per se when it comes to protests in Nigeria anymore. Since they have been coming out when government bring any policy that's against the wish of the masses, they have never achieved anything tangible.
The NLC says it has resolved to give government a 2-week ultimatum to implement its demands or risk another action. This, according to the union, is an attempt to force government to improve the living conditions of citizens. There are some speculation that the Trade Union Congress not joining the nationwide protest called by the Nigeria Labour Congress spells a crack in the relationship between both unions. Now, while that is being speculated, there is a subtle rumor that the NLC protest was just a mere show of "we are still here." But what does Nigerians say about a union fighting for their rights? Do they trust the Labour Congress?
I don't have 100% belief in NLC.
NLC is just fighting for their own rights based on the inflation in the country. So that's why they are fighting for their own rights. But I'm not seeing it as if they are fighting for Nigerians.
Them too, they have their own targets too. So they don't have to like use this one too to cover up. But them, they know what they are after.
While it is obvious that nothing much has really been achieved in Labour's engagement with government, despite several protests carried out, questions are being asked on the current approach by the union because it is clear that the current strategy is not achieving much results. In Abuja for News Central, Marvelous Oboma.
Thank you for staying tuned. Nigeria's House of Representatives has tasked the Joint Admission Matriculation Board to extend the deadline for registration of students to allow more candidates participate in this year's matriculation examination. This followed the motion raised on the floor of the House, where lawmakers mandated its Committee on Education and Legislative Compliance to enforce strict compliance.
Without extension of the registration, many candidates will not be able to register and participate in the exercise. And that means there will not be a wider coverage and participation in this year's UTME examination in Nigeria. Convinced that your quick response to the extension of time by 2 weeks will encourage the parents of this candidate to persistently register their children. Importantly, this will reassure the public on the confidence of this current administration in Nigeria.
And now to politics. 1 year after the Nigeria's presidential election held across Nigeria, some youths in the South-South region have assessed the process with recommendations for the nation's next general elections. News Center's correspondent Austin Azu completes this report.
Young people between the ages of 18 to 35 coming from the 6 states in the South-South region converged on Benin City, Edo State capital, and Port Harcourt, River State capital to brainstorm. Their mission is to assess, analyze the key challenges that trade the pre-election, election day, and post-election periods of the 2023 general elections.
This project is supporting you to lead electoral reform effort. And we chose Benin because Benin will be having up the cycle election, and we think it's necessary and very important to come in here and organize this youth forum so that we can reach the youth here and by extension reach the voting public.
So what we want and what I want to see Niger Delta youth from the Niger Delta, youth from the South do is to engage and get involved in the process.
The participants identified the key challenges to include the redesign of the Naira notes, Nigeria's new election legal framework, inadequate preparation by INEC, challenges in PVC collection and registration, ethnic and tribal bias, among others.
To have a better life, and they see such as an opportunity to have a better life.
Some of the recommendations on how to improve the credibility and transparency of future elections include introduction of electronic voting and digital transmission of results. The group also recommended that the process of registering to vote and collection of PVC should be simplified. On ethnic and tribal bias, INEC should strengthen collaboration with traditional religious leaders for effective enlightenment of their followers.
And voters' education. Those are the areas that are basically where we get a lot of faults and errors. So if we can actually portray those areas and make them to be a little bit lighter in terms of different language communications, I think we'll get a way ahead of it.
One of the things that we actually paid attention to is finding the right channel at which the electoral chairman is actually appointed, elected, or selected to actually do the interests of the Nigerian people.
On the forthcoming Edo State governorship off-cycle election, the participants also called on INEC to collaborate with CSOs and NOA for massive sensitizations of the electorate and politicians on active involvement in the process and shove violence before, during, and after the election. In Benin City for News Central, I'm Austin Azu.
A conservation initiative for environmental restoration and carbon isolation is underway in Nigeria's Niger Delta region. The conservation project will generate carbon credits that would be used as source for alternative income for those locals who may otherwise earn money from illegal logging and deforestation. Youth Central's correspondent Austin Azu has more.
Mangroves play a key role in coastal line defense, protecting against sea level rise, storm surges, and erosion. They also safeguard the ecosystem by functioning as natural pollution filters. However, with the crude oil exploration and spillages in the Niger Delta region, there have been an alteration in the natural sequence. Against this background, the Cerebib Capital, Aid Vasa and Foundation for Partnership Initiatives in the Niger Delta are set to collaborate with the Delta State government on a wide-scale mangrove restoration and conservation projects in the Niger Delta region. Delta State Governor, who expressed deep commitment to environmental conservation and development of the region, said the Pioneer Creative Solutions would also address local demands for job creation, infrastructure development, education, and climate resilience building.
This program set a tangible precedent by demonstrating how environmental stewardship can harmoniously coexist with human development aspirations. I'm deeply committed to environmental conservation and sustainable development, and therefore ready to endorse the groundbreaking mangrove and seagrass conservation.
According to Cerebib's estimations, the mangrove restoration project has the potential and aims to sequester up to 5,320,000 tons of carbon each year, while helping to prevent the deforestation of 250,000 hectares of forest and replantation of 20,000 hectares.
So, to answer your question, we're beginning this, really, the work starts in March. Hard in terms of actually deploying the program, we're probably still 10, 12 months away because there's work that has to be done in terms of looking at soil sampling, population sampling, a lot of work on the ground that has to be done.
Just recently, a bill for the conservation and protection of ecosystems and endangered species has just been passed for first reading in the House of Representatives.
This initiative will no doubt promote responsible resource management, including its contribution to carbon reduction targets, improved air quality, and public health in the Niger Delta region. In Asaba, for News Central, I'm Austin Azu.
And now to health matters. Nigeria's House of Representatives has called for mandatory drug testing for students across the country to help curb the menace of substance abuse. This followed a motion on the floor of the House on the need to introduce mandatory drug testing for secondary school students in Nigeria, owing to the increasing recorded cases of substance abuse being witnessed. The House, while expressing worry over the situation, urged the Federal Ministries of Education and Health to collaborate and develop a mandatory drug testing program in secondary schools, and also urged the National Orientation Agency and the Drug Law Enforcement Agency to increase sensitization among students.
Also worried that according to studies which showed a notable prevalence of drugs and substance abuse across secondary schools in Nigeria, 1 in every 4 students between 15 to 19 years abuse substances. Syrup containing codeine and tramadol top the list of drugs, ranking higher than cannabis. Aware that random student drug testing, RSDT, is a drug prevention program whereby students are tested for recent use of illegal substance and is aimed at deterring drug use and identifying students who need help with staying drug-free. Cognizant that a mandatory routine and random drug testing for students is for preventive, not punitive purposes, and early intervention is crucial for achieving success in tackling the menace of substance.
A civil society organization, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, has urged the federal government of Nigeria to fully implement and increase taxation on sugar-sweetened beverages to a minimum of 130 naira per litre. The organization made the appeal at a public presentation of the simulation study of the potential fiscal and public health effects of SSB tax in Nigeria on Thursday in Lagos. News centrist Adeshewa Odushoga has details.
In 2021, the Nigerian government introduced a sugar-sweetened beverage tax embedded in the Finance Act of 2021, introducing a 10 naira levy for every 1 liter of carbonated drink and non-alcoholic drink. Now, what this means is that for every 50 centiliter of carbonated drinks such as this that you consume, the Nigerian government gets 5 naira. Now, a civil society organization is asking the Nigerian government to increase the 10 naira levy for every 1 liter to 130 naira per liter on carbonated drinks. The executive director of CAPA, Akimbode Oluwafemi, emphasized the need for a multi-sectoral approach that combines policy engagement with public awareness, community mobilization, and stakeholder consultation and engagement.
The government does not even have the revenue to spend on public health. And so by going this way, government again can also begin to earmark some of this money to fund access to health in Nigeria.
The organization made the appeal at a public presentation of the simulation study of the potential fiscal and public health effect of SSB tax in Nigeria.
As you're increasing tax, you're also controlling the behavior in terms of response of the industry as well. For example, I made mention during my presentation the case of South Africa, whereby they are charging their SSB tax based on the sugar content of each product. So if that as well can also be implemented in Nigeria, it's something that will make this very effective, and our desired results will be achieved.
This is what CAPA is doing. We are trying to, let's start from the root cause of these diseases. That's why we are saying people should reduce the excessive intake of sugar drinks and also promote the public policy, that is the SSB tax policy. We know that with this tax, we can reduce access to unhealthy drinks, and we can also make it less affordable for the general public.
Some of the major health implications of the excess consumption of these fizzy drinks include obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart diseases, mental disorders, and cancer, amongst others. With the rising cost of treating this non-communicable disease, the group said it was important to discourage the source through awareness and a tax system. In Lagos for News Central, Adeshewa Odushoga.
The Yobe state government has quarantined 206 persons following the outbreak of cerebrospinal meningitis in the 3 local government areas in the state, resulting in the death of 20 persons. This was as the Commissioner for Health in Yobe State, Dr. Habu Dahiru, disclosed on Monday that the state had lost 6 persons to the deadly disease. The spokesman for the Yobe State Ministry of Health, Sulaiman Gimba, on Thursday in the media briefing that the state recorded 20 deaths in Potiskum, Fika, and Fun local government areas. The deceased victims, Gimba said, were students of Science Technical College, the government's Girls Science Technical College, and Federal Government Girls College, all in Potiskum local government area. A major Senegalese civil society collective said it is joining forces with the opposition to ensure the presidential election is held before April 2nd, when President Macky Sall's mandate runs out. The West African country plunged into its worst turmoil in decades after Sall's last-minute deferral of presidential election that was due to take place last Sunday. The Asunu Election Collective said it was joining with a group of 16 of the 19 candidates approved by the Constitutional Council to stand in the presidential poll. It is also uniting with the opposition coalition F24 and the Front for the Defense of Democracy.
Le Front de Résistance, qui est composé des plateformes Asunu Élections, FC25, F24, FDD, ainsi que d'universitaires et d'experts électoraux, se mobilise pour un front populaire massif, prêt à défendre avec vigueur notre Constitution et à garantir l'intégrité de notre processus électoral. M. Macky Sall a volontairement choisi de plonger notre nation dans une crise constitutionnelle avec pour dessein évident de conserver le pouvoir par des voies illégitimes. Cette violation de la Constitution, masquée sous un simulacre de dialogue, vise à prolonger indûment son mandat.
Staying in Senegal, the governor of the St. Louis region says at least 26 people seeking to reach Europe died after the loaded vessel sank off northern Senegal. Alion Badara Sam said the bodies had been found when the boat got into difficulty in a particularly dangerous patch of the northern coast. He adds that 21 people had been rescued. The St. Louis estuary, where the Senegal River meets the Atlantic Ocean, is notorious for strong currents and areas of thick mud. Sam did not say how many people were missing from the vessel, which witnesses said could have been carrying more than 300 people. The South African Federation of Trade Unions have rejected the plan by the multi-party charter that will purportedly end load shedding and achieve energy security. The plan calls for the unbundling and dismantling of ESCOM and privatization of energy provision. The union says it contends that the rolling electricity blackouts were essentially caused by the fact that ESCOM is a publicly owned company and holds a monopoly in generation. It adds that its crisis was engineered when it was prevented from building additional generation capacity to meet the growing demand that came with the democratic transformation, giving access to 80% of the population that were previously disadvantaged from the accessing electricity under apartheid. SATFO also rejects the drive to liberalize the energy generation market as proposed in the plan, as well as the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill. And to unpack these, I'm joined by the spokesperson, South African Federation of Trade Unions, Trevor Shako. Good afternoon from here. Glad to have you join me.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us.
All right, Trevor, so tell me, why are you rejecting the multi-party charter plan to end load shedding?
We are rejecting the multi-party charter to end load shedding because, in our view, it is merely a plan and a program to privatize energy provision in our country. As a federation, we are for a public pathway provision of electricity, which means that we continue to support ESCOM, and we want ESCOM to be the public company that champions the provision of electricity in our country, including the introduction of new renewable energy sources ought to be championed through ESCOM. So this so-called plan is just those members of the party who are economic liberals of the parties that unite to try to bring an alternative to the ruling African National Congress, which in our view, they are, by the way, not bringing any alternative. So any plans to privatize our energy provision, we are opposed to, and will continue to put our opposition to this particular plan by the multi-party charter.
So beyond privatization, what other criticisms does the union have regarding the proposed charter plan?
Look, in the proposed charter plan, they have about 11, if not 10, of the plans, or rather points that they've put forward that they are going to do. One is that they want to expedite the unbundling of ESCOM. Now, ESCOM, to those who do not know, is a vertically integrated company. In other words, it has generation, transmission, and distribution. So they want it to be dislodged into 3 entities, one focusing on the generation, the other focusing on transmission, and the other in distribution. Already they've done that, and they've registered a new company, a transmission operator, which is now registered as a government entity. But in the generation market, they've already begun such a particular process, and they are introducing private companies in the name of the independent power producers. So we are opposed to that. The second thing is that we don't think that the so-called introduction of competition and liberalization of the market itself will solve our problems. Our problems do not lie necessarily there. In our view, this is just a way to turn energy production and energy provision into a site of capital accumulation and profit rigging. And this is the reason why they are bringing these companies. And when we have these companies in the generation of electricity, and they will be competing, of course, for prices in selling, it may appear, because this is the thing they are bringing to the public, it may appear that competition will then drive down prices and as a result, give the best pricing of electricity to the people. But that is not necessarily true. We know that they have actually, in the agreements they have with Eskom, the independent power producers are forcing Eskom to a certain level of tariffs through which they will sell the cost of unit of electricity to Eskom. So it is not even going to bring the price of electricity down. It is just going to ensure that there is introduction of these companies, and eventually when they begin to monopolize in the market itself, and we are left with fewer, and they will collude in terms of profit price marking, and of course trying to expand their profit margins. This will expand energy poverty for the vast majority of the people who depend on electricity, of course, as a source of heating.
I know you've talked about the kickback on privatization or even liberalization of Eskom, but what other shortcomings do you foresee in the multi-party charter plan if these were implemented?
Look, the first thing is that capital has a tendency of monopolization. It starts from the onset as an entity or rather a system that embraces competition, and its fuel, by the way, is competition. But as various companies gobble one another, acquisitions are approved, we know that there's a tendency towards monopolization. So this problem is not latent, is latent in the plans, but it is not explicit in the plans. We know that it is imminent. Everywhere where there is a capitalist market, there is always a tendency towards monopolization. And we fear monopolization in the private hands because it would mean collusion of prices. We've already seen that in this country, in, for instance, chicken production, bread production, and even maize meal. So we know that there will be such particular collusion, and that collusion between these particular companies who would have monopolized the market itself would lead to the increase in energy poverty. They also are saying they want to incentivize the individual companies and individual households to install rooftop solar so that they can generate electricity on their own. This is again problematic, and they intend to incentivize these companies by bringing what we call feed-in tariffs. In other words, if you are an individual household, you have installed a rooftop solar and you produce excess electricity, you will then be incentivized to sell back that excess electricity back into the grid, to Eskom in particular. And that for us is just problematic because it means that, one, you have Eskom that has got to guarantee not only the private households, but also private companies who are proliferating the market through the introduction of IPPs. So that is a problem for us because it poses one threat to the energy security of the country in the sense that most and the vast population of majority may not be able to afford the electricity. But secondly, in that the government's fiscus will still be burdened by the private profiteers because government money will be used to underwrite the IPPs, the independent power producers, which are basically the private companies in the energy sector.
Well, thank you so much for your insights on the news. Trevor Shackle, thank you so much once again.
Thank you very much.
In East Africa, former Tanzanian President Ali Hassan Mwinyi, who introduced multi-party democracy to East African nation, died on Thursday at the age of 98. President Samia Suluhu Hassan made the announcement that he had been receiving treatment for lung cancer. Mwinyi had been hospitalized in London in November last year before returning to continue treatment in the main Tanzanian city of Dar es Salaam, Hassan said. Tanzania will observe 7 days of mourning with national flags flown at half-mast. At least 44 people died and dozens injured after a fire blazed through a 7-story building in an upscale neighborhood in the Bangladeshi capital of Dhaka late on Thursday. Bangladesh's health minister, Samantha Lal Sen, confirmed this to newsmen after visiting the Dhaka Medical College Center and a nearby burn center. Police Inspector Bakomiu said one more person died at Sadaka's main police hospital to bring the death toll to 44. In the meantime, SEND said at least 40 injured people were being treated at the city's main burn hospital.
আমার কাজিন তার ফুল ফ্যামিলি 5 জন হাজব্যান্ড ওয়াইফ 2 মেয়ে এক ছেলে 5 জনই মারা গেছে
দেখতে পেলাম যে লোকজন এদিকে দৌড়াচ্ছে এবং ছবি তুলতেছে সবাই লাইভ করা একটু এগোইতে দেখছে এদিকে আগুন অনেক ইয়ে করে আগুন লাগছে তারপরে এখানে এসে ঢুকলাম দেখলাম বিল্ডিংয়ে প্রচুর ধাউ ধাউ করে আগুনের প্রবণতা অনেক বেশি ছিল এবং সঙ্গে সঙ্গে এখানে অনেক পুলিশের উপস্থিতি ছিল তারাও এটাকে কন্ট্রোল করার চেষ্টা করতেছে এবং ফায়ার সার্ভিসও আগুনের যে ইয়ে ছিল প্রভাবটা এটাকে
Zimbabwe's inflation rate spiked to a 6-month high due to the local dollar's ongoing decline against the US dollar, marking a challenging start to the 34.8% in the previous month, with consumer prices rising 5.4% in February compared to 6.6% in January. The escalating inflationary pressure underscores the need for new measures to support the struggling local currency, which has appreciated by nearly 2/3 on the official market this year. President Emerson Mnangagwa hinted at a currency overhaul on February 6, 2024, with Finance Minister Mthuli Nkube suggesting the possibility of backing the currency with gold. These plans resulted in the central bank postponing the release of a monetary policy statement after a rate-setting meeting in January. Despite various efforts, the country has faced challenges in stabilizing its currency. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesitsha Kyanyago has stated that there will be no interest rate cuts until inflation is under control despite upcoming national elections. The central bank has maintained an 8.25 interest rate, the highest in nearly 15 years, as it aims to anchor inflation expectations at 4.5% midpoint of its target range. Kyanyago cited food prices, geopolitical risks, and global supply chain and energy market impact as inflation risks. He also dismissed election pressures, emphasizing the bank's constitutional independence. The bank plans to ease debt pressures by tapping 150 billion rand from the country's gold and foreign exchange contingency reserve account. Regarding plans to revise the bank's inflation target, Kyanyago stated that any revision would be lower and not higher. And that's all on the news at this hour. But before we go, let's take a look again at some of the major stories. Nigeria's Senate has urged Police Service Commission to recruit 10 each from 774 councils to tackle insecurity. The Senegal's civil society opposition have united for polls before April 2nd. We also told you that former Tanzanian President Ali Hassan Mwinyi dies of cancer. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen and follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch us live on DSTV, channel 422, Star Times, channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Adebola Adedugba.